Hey, how's it going, everybody? Today, I'm going to get on and I'm going to talk about the next process and everything that's been going on in my case, because I just want to educate as many people as I can about how the Navy completely threw my life into a whirlwind and really had no reason to do so, right? So, this is an 8-part series of 10, I think 9 parts. We have one more part we're going to talk about. And I'm probably going to go live later just to get it done and over with, because there's some things I want to do with these. And we'll just see what happens. But if you didn't see, we've added a non-Apple product to the giveaway. So if you're not an Apple person, you don't want an Apple 11 Pro 11, don't worry, we'll get you. We've talked and found. And by the way, I'm like working with some people that are helping me do this. So I talked to the group that's helping me put this together, and we decided, like, hey, why not offer a Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus, which is equal value, but we're probably just going to change it. Like, I'm willing to raffle off anything that's of greater value, of equal value of a $1,500 phone for you. So if you want a Google Pixel or if you want something else, like, let me know. Like, I just want to hire a lawyer so that I can do what's right and fight the Navy in this endeavor. And I don't want to be greedy, so I want to give back to somebody for helping me out. So yesterday we talked about the formal physical evaluation board that basically interrogated my wife and my shipmates and my boss, and they took all of the testimony and they basically cherry picked it to say, people like you, you're not a bad person, your command likes you, so we're going to go ahead and find you fit for duty. So the next step in this, I had a lawyer at that point. So the next step in this was to get my lawyer to file a petition to the Physical Evaluation Board president, and he wrote a very legalized, explanations and why the Navy's wrong and medical legalities and stuff that I don't really understand a lot of. But if you want to read the letter, it's like a 7-page document on the website, and it's available. Everything's available on the website for you to read. I'm just giving you my commentary onto it to kind of give you a quick version so that people can kind of understand what's going on. So after the Navy came back and they denied that, we wrote another letter to the president of the Physical Evaluation Board and said, we don't agree with the assessment of the Navy. The Navy started off saying that Petty Officer Little was not on medication. Now they're saying that, well, they didn't even address the fact that I was on medication. They're just saying that I lied about my service. They're saying that I didn't guard ISIS prisoners. They're saying that I didn't guard death row detainee prisoners. They're saying that I wasn't in a facility when riots happened or breakouts tried to happen. They said that I lied about being in an area whenever certain things happened. And so we disputed that. We disputed that to the formal board or to the president of the board with letters. And these were letters from my commanders that were in charge of me during that time. And so I have a letter from my colonel, Colonel Ken King, who's a great guy and was one of the best leaders that I had. I really enjoyed him. And Colonel King was he was willing to write me a letter on my behalf to inform the Navy that they were mistaken. And so was my commanding officer and my XO. So we provided them these letters. So let's see if I can pull them up real quick. I thought I had everything opened up before I started, and I didn't. So let's see. So apologize. Oh, here we go. So these letters are they're pulling up right now. So the letters from my base commander and my CO and XO basically validated my argument points that I did guard bad people. So here's the letter from Colonel King, and I'll just pull some parts again. They're on the site for you to do so. Deploying as one of the key operational leaders and responsible for approximately 60 soldiers and sailors, he executed his duties with precision. And and whatnot. ABH Tulil performed in an outstanding manner during his deployment in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom as a compound guard for my military police battalion. His actions emulate Army values, and he could always be relied upon to provide superlative results. During our deployment in Iraq, ABH Tulil was subjected to numerous dangerous situations in close proximity to some of the most dangerous terrorists in the Middle East, and he has always prevailed flawlessly with polished professionalism. So that's from my base commander disputing the facts of the Army, saying that there were no intense situations. There was never a reason for me to fear for my life. My XO of the Navy writes, and he really gets into the weeds of stuff, so we're just going to... He says, I personally viewed videotapes of an assault on our sailors in December 2008, January 2009 frame, and processed a number of incidents of assaults on sailors of the Navy Provisional Detainee Battalion 5 from March to April 2009. He says he's not aware of my experiences in Afghanistan, but he says, I can tell you he witnessed or was victim, but what I can tell you, he witnessed or was victim of assaults by detainees while in Iraq with MPDB-5, the same detainees that are now running ISIS, who at the time were on death row or were to be imprisoned for life under the Iraqi government. It is a travesty that the Navy has not adequately investigated the incidents at Camp Bucca, nor sought out additional information from more reliable resources. He talks about my performance of being an amazing sailor, and that if they have any questions, to contact him. And then my CO, he writes a very long letter, and he was an aviator, so he talks a lot about me being exposed to combat and then working in the aviation field. And so he talks about how during my time at Camp Bucca, I struck out as a top performer, a hard worker, an optimist, and a highly capable sailor. He never shirked from his duties or wavered despite fecal attacks, attempted assaults, or highly planned attempted escapes. I can speak with certainty that the men and women who guarded detainees were continually under threat. I specifically remember 2 major escape attempts where lives were specifically threatened. I can speak to the daily stressors of mind-numbing duties of guards working through the relentless targeting by detainees hell-bent on exploiting sailor weaknesses. The constant contact with the enemy at times had debilitating effects on very good sailors. This threat would have been heightened for ABH Tulil as the compound section leader, overseeing death row inmates who were guilty of particular egregious crimes. Prior to assuming command of MPDB-5, I read a behavioral study which spoke of the level of PTSD of detainee guards and how they often suffered with a quicker onset of PTSD than soldiers in the line of fire. As a result of this study, we took significant measures to combat the problems associated with PTSD. Despite our efforts, we struggled daily with their effects. The battalion, prior to our arrival, had experienced 1 suicide during the deployment, and our command experienced 1 at home following deployment. The MPDB-5's mission was to guard the most dangerous and violent detainees within Camp Bucca. The mission of the senior staff was to lift up the sailors who did the guarding. Out of the 400 sailors in the command, ABH Tulil stuck out as a solid performer who had endured significant harassment. Having heard of how he has suffered since his return and having read some of his diagnoses, I can say without question that while he performed his duties admirably, that duty impacted him considerably. With this in mind, knowing the danger and exhaustive nature of the ABH's work, Petty Officer Little is in no way belongs on the flight deck. His continued service, especially in his rate, would put other lives in peril. ABH-2 has been a strong and memorable sailor. He has done his duty and has paid the price for doing it. He deserves full respect and benefits from the Navy for a job well done. That's from my commanding officer that the United States Navy put in charge of me and 400 sailors while we were deployed in Iraq. And also the words of my executive officer, as well as my commanding colonel, who was in charge of us. So this is how I disputed my facts to the Navy, right? So the Navy says, you didn't go through any of this. You're lying about it. So then instead of going to like Seaman Schmuckatelli and saying, hey, bro, I'll buy you a beer if you write me a buddy statement, I went straight to the top and I said, hey, guys, you said there was an open door policy after we left. Here's what I'm dealing with. We've lost guys to suicide. Can you help me? And they did. And so this is how the Navy replies to this. This is directly from the board, and you can read this on the website. After thorough review of your case, I have determined that the Physical Evaluation Board's decision is correct and supported by a preponderance of the evidence, as required by reference B. In making my determination, I found insufficient evidence your condition preclude you from performing duties appropriate for your office, grade, rank, or rating. Supporting my findings is the most recent non-medical assessment from your commanding officer dated 28 October 2015 that recommended you for retention in the Naval Reserves and stated that you were working outside of your specialty because of your conditions. The non-medical assessment also opined that with medical care, there was no reason you could not perform your assignment duties. Your last observed performance evaluation, 13 July to 15 to 14 March 15, also demonstrates your fitness for duty as it prescribes you as a model sailor and included a recognition for early promotion. Finally, your ability to sustain full-time employment in a demanding civilian occupation shows you are capable of serving in a reserve shore command that involves clerical duties. The evidence does suggest that your ability to serve as an aviation bosun mate aboard an afloat unit may be compromised. However, the inability to deploy does not automatically compel an unfitness determination when the evidence indicates an individual can perform other appropriate duties. In your case, I found your condition to have not prevented you from performing valuable service in the past and are unlikely to do so in the future. Therefore, your petition is denied, and then they tell me I can appeal it to the BCNR, which I do. So I want to talk a little bit about what he says here. And so I completely disagree with him on these issues. And this is how I disagree with him. I appreciate the fact that the Navy seen that I was a stellar performer. I appreciate the fact that the Navy felt the need to continue to add me to the early promote list. I do. I really wanted to do the best I could to be in the Navy. I never wanted to have a dishonorable service. My great-grandfather died on the USS Wasp in World War II. My grandfather served in Korea and Vietnam. And after 9/11, I felt like I had no other opportunities in my life except to join the United States Navy. And I did so, and I served honorably. I was honorably serving on the USS Ronald Reagan and the USS Tarawa. I went into combat. I did everything that I was supposed to do. And even when my life was falling apart, I was still trying not to get kicked out of the Navy, right? So whenever I could have given up, and when I could have quit, and when I could have done all these things, I didn't. I did one time. I went to the Navy and I asked them for help in 2011, and I told them that I was going to commit suicide. And the Navy told me that there was nothing wrong with me. I just needed to take some time off and come back in 6 months and I would be better. And I did that. I did exactly what they told me to do. However, I also tried to go home and commit suicide. And if it weren't for a friend trying to stop me, I would have done it. And that's when I got help in the VA. I'm a reservist, so I couldn't, there's no military medical for me. I had to go to the VA. So I went to the VA, I started getting help. And that's when I started fighting this issue with VA BS, right? That's a whole different story, and I'm not mad at them because they're taking care of me right now. But I go back to the Navy Reserves 6 months later, and they say, hey, buddy, where you been for 6 months? And I said, well, you guys signed this form that said I didn't have to come back for 6 months. And they had provided me a different form with something that looked nothing like my signature, stating that I was still supposed to be drilling during that time. And they tried to kick me out. They actually tried to give me a dishonorable discharge, which is against the law. And I fought them. On the letter where it says you're being separated from the Navy, if you want to appeal this, you can. I did. And I appealed it, and I got a Navy lawyer, and the Navy lawyer came. His name's Captain Golden. He was an amazing gentleman, and he represented my case. And we found that the Navy not only tried to lie about that document, they lied about mailing me 36 pieces of official mail, and they forged my signature on official mail cards. Like, that was how the Navy tried to thank me for my service to Iraq and Afghanistan on back-to-back tours. So I got over that, and I was fine. I was back in the reserves. So they're accusing me here of not being eligible for retirement because I'm a good sailor. That's what they're telling me. They also say that while I can't work on the flight deck, I can go work in various administrative roles. Well, they're not willing to give me that opportunity. After this letter came out, I got a phone call from my commanding officer telling me that I needed to report to duty the following drill weekend, which was 3 days later, and that I was going to be subject to the BCA, the Body Composition Assessment, and the Physical Readiness Exam, right? So it's where you get weighed in, and if you weigh in and you make weight, then you go perform your 1.5 mile run and your sit-ups and push-ups. Well, the Navy told me that because I was overweight, that I was going to be administratively separated. Because the Navy, according to official documents, said that there was nothing wrong with me. I was fit for duty. I had no excuse for being overweight. I had no excuse for anything because medically I was cleared. There was nothing wrong with me. So I lost my mind. And I didn't know what to do because the Navy says that I am a stellar top performer, except I can't make weight standards because of my medications that I'm on. And so I said, what the hell? I'm going to get kicked out. Like, here they're telling me I'm a stellar sailor. I can continue serving in the Navy, but they have no intention of giving me a waiver for that. So I call my lawyer. My lawyer negotiates with my commanding officer, and he calls me back and he says, you got 20 minutes to make a decision. You're either going to go in the IRR or you're going to get kicked out of the Navy. And I lost it. I had a panic attack. I was crying. I couldn't get off of my floor in my office. Like, I was a fucking mess. I dismissed all of my staff because I was worried about, I don't know, it was awful. So the Navy, fire truck. So the Navy won that, and so they put me in the IRR. And what happens in the IRR? Well, I'm an E5, so I can't serve over 18 years. So when I hit 18 years, done. I can't serve more than 18 years in the Navy. So at this point, I'm about 5 years in the hole on bad years where I don't have retirement points. So now I got to serve 25 years to be in the Navy. So I got to serve 7 years beyond 18 to get to my retirement that they're not going to allow me to get because in the IRR you can't re-enlist in the IRR. You can't serve beyond your higher tenure in the IRR, and they weren't going to let me back on active duty or reserve duty because I'm fat and overweight. So that's how the Navy repaid me, right? So they said, you can still do all this stuff. They could have sent me to legalman school. They could have sent me to personnel school. They could have sent me to admin school. They could have gave me a waiver for my weight based on the medications that I was on. They had no intention of doing that. They say that I'm medically fit for duty and that while some of these things preclude me from being on a ship, I could still do something. Well, they weren't willing to let me do something. They talk about an assessment that my commanding officer gave me that had never met me. All right. He had never met me, and he gave me an assessment stating that I was a stellar performer. What the Navy failed to look at was I hadn't had an evaluation in over 3 years at that point. 3 years I hadn't had an evaluation. No one gave me an eval in over 3 years, right? That's not right. And I kept asking people about this, but they kept telling me not to worry about it. And I kept saying, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to have some evaluations. How are you properly assessing me if I don't have some evaluations? So I brought that to their attention, and they told me I was wrong. And then magically, these non-observed evaluations showed up in my record. The reason that they weren't there was because I transferred. Liz being on active duty, we transferred from one base to another, and so I ended up transferring. It was kind of weird. Like I transferred from in the reserves. I went from one unit to another, to another, to another, and like all of these transfers were right at eval season. So like I had like all these non-observed, but like they weren't in my record. So this guy made an assessment based on the last eval that I had in my system, which was pretty much from Afghanistan, right? Maybe Buffalo. I got some really good evaluations of Buffalo because I was doing pretty good then. So this commanding officer, he's never met me. He doesn't know me. No one in the command knows me. I'm new to the command. I check into the command and I got problems. And I'm like, I need to go to medical. I think I got PTSD and some other stuff. So he writes assessment and it's beautifully written. And like when I wanted to stay in, I was like, yeah, that's great. But then when I realized that I had severe PTSD and staying in wasn't an option, I was like, hey, Cap McCracken, I really appreciate it if we could change that because I don't think it's going to be good for me. And I think that me leaving the Navy is probably the best thing for me and for the Navy. And he fought me on it. He said no. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to give me that. So the next thing that happened was I ended up getting a fight with this guy, not a real fight, like an argument, through email. And then I'd bring my lawyer in on it. And then he refuses to meet with me and my lawyer. And all my lawyer wanted to tell him was like, hey, listen, when Mike started this process, he thought he could stay in the Navy. He's been under evaluation from the Navy for a couple of years at Walter Reed. He understands now that serving in the Navy is not going to be beneficial to his health or to the Navy, and he doesn't want to bring discredit on the uniform that you wear. And he would like for you to change your medical assessment. He refused to meet with us. My lawyer came up from Louisiana. He refused to meet with us. He didn't want to meet with us. So he wrote like this little like one-liner attachment to his like beautiful thing. And he writes, Petty Officer Little no longer wishes to be in the Navy. And that was his official letter that he sends to the board, right? Completely inadequate. And then not a single person from his command came to my board to like support me. So I'm like kind of angry about that too, right? And then they talk about my civilian job. Hey, you know what? I'm good at my job because I'm an advocate for people like me, right? I can't go work in the oil and gas industry. I'm not educated for that. I can't go work some tax law firm. I can't go work I can't go work at a law firm. I can't go work anywhere where like they don't want to fight for veterans, right? I can fight for veterans because I'm a veteran. Because I lost 15 shipmates to suicide. That's why I'm an advocate. Like, to say that my civilian employment is the same as my military employment is bizarre. It doesn't make sense. There's no reason for it. And then for him to say that the preponderance of evidence is basically he couldn't find anything. Like, I don't know what other evidence he wants. Commanding officer letters, colonel letters, letters from an admiral, letters from all of my doctors. Like, what more evidence does a board want? 2014 and 2017, the board, the Secretary of Defense said that liberal consideration will be given to service members with post-traumatic stress disorder. And so what did I provide to them? And like, they basically say like, you don't even have to provide really anything. You just kind of have to say that you got it, and they're going to they're going to find in favor of you because the liberal consideration. That's what it says, right? I provided more medical information than I probably should have at this point, right? So like, I don't know what they're actually looking for. I mean, maybe I should have went and got some homeless guy on the street to write a letter for me, and maybe that's what they wanted. But you'll learn about this later. I'm gonna go live one more time on this topic, and then all my lives after this will probably just be me complaining about stuff. But I'll go live and I'll talk about the BCNR. Even in the BCNR, they taunt me. They go, while you enjoy professional references and military leadership friendships, we still found against you. So like they taunt me a little bit, right? So this is kind of like my life, right? This is what I deal with. So I'm not. Listen, if I didn't have like a fraction of the evidence that I presented to this board, I would give up. I would think I'm wrong. There's no reason why this is a thing. There's no reason why I should keep fighting this. They're right. I got like one letter, and therefore they're probably right, and I just need to give up and go on. I got my VA disability and live my life happily. But they have officially attacked my military service. They have accused me, and by accusing me, they're accusing my shipmates of not doing the things that we did in combat. They are accusing me and my 399 shipmates, 15 of them who have committed suicide, not from that unit, but a couple of them from that unit, a couple from Afghanistan, a couple from another unit. They are accusing us of not doing the jobs that we said that we did. They're accusing us of telling them that we did jobs that they sent us to do. Right? This like reminds me of like, does anyone remember like hearing like a Vietnam guy talk about like, you know, oh, I was in Vietnam, but actually I was in Cambodia, but like, then the government's like, well, we weren't actually in Cambodia. Like, that's how I feel right now. I guarded ISIS prisoners. I was there when they formed the damn group ISIS. I guarded like these bad guys. Like I see people on TV leading these raids with ISIS, and I'm like, that guy was in fucking that guy was in my in cell number 14. That guy was in cell number 18. You know, like I remember these guys. Like I read names and I'm like, oh shit, I remember that. And then I go Wikipedia them and I'm like, yep, that was one of my chiefs in my compound. That was one of the guys that was in charge of all my people. Because whenever the president pulled us out of Iraq and they did the vacuum suck right into the country, they let all of those guys that we had guarded go. And they went in and they murdered all of the Iraqi correction officers that we trained. And it was a travesty. Whenever I watched that happen on TV, it broke my heart because I trained some of the greatest Iraqi correction officers around. And I guarantee they came in and they killed anyone who had anything to do with that prison because they know who they were. The first place they went was to all of the compounds and they released all of those people. And then they came to Qasr. It happened. I watched that happen. I guarded those guys. Anyway, it breaks my heart. So for the Navy to just like continue to say, hey, you were a great sailor, so we're not going to do this. Let's talk about all the shitbags that served in the Navy that get better treatment than I've got. Or my shipmates. By the way, by me fighting this, I'm fighting this so that my shipmates can tag along in it, right? I win a federal court case with this, my shipmates can come along and say, hey, the Navy screwed me, and I need help, and this is proof. And then they got a court case to, like, reference, right? So, like, this isn't just for me. This is for those 400 guys my CEO talked about, that the Navy says we didn't do what we did. That's why I'm doing this. That's why this is so important. This isn't just for me. This is for all of those guys that I served with. $20,000 is a lot of money for a lawyer, but it's necessary, right? There's no free lawyers for this. I've got lawyers that are talking to lawyers, trying to find lawyers that'll take this case for free. Everybody wants to support veterans. Everyone says they support veterans. This isn't a veteran case. This is a case with the Department of Defense. If you think that there's a law firm out there that does do pro bono work for veterans, look at their lawyer webpage, and you'll see that it'll say things like VA claims. It'll say VA home loans. It'll say GI Bill issues, Veterans Benefit Administration, Veteran Court of Appeals. It won't say anything about military law. There are different law firms that do military law. You actually have to Google search. Suing the military in court, and then or military law, and then military law lawyers will come up. There are specific lawyers that take cases for the BCNR and whatnot and so forth. And they're anywhere from like $125 an hour to a retainer of $20,000. And majority of it being on the $20,000 scale. So, and you kind of want to get one that's not on the hourly wage because these guys are all veterans too. So everyone's like, well, surely they'll cut you a deal. Most of these guys are veterans themselves, and so they're not trying to cut another veteran a deal, right? So it's better if you can kind of get one that's on a retainer because $20,000, they have to kind of like be careful with the money because they know once you sign the contract and you give them the $20,000 retainer, they're probably not going to get any more money out of you. So So I've done my research on that. I've looked into it. So I appreciate everyone who tells me, hey, I got a lawyer. My cousin's a lawyer that does disability law in Wisconsin. I get it, and I really appreciate it. But he probably doesn't practice military law. He may not be admitted to the federal bar. Most Midwestern lawyers don't. They're not admitted to the federal bar. They have to actually contract that out to someone in the District of Columbia or something like that. So that's kind of like the way that works. So I just wanted to explain that. I hope no one takes offense by me trying to explain to you, like, I appreciate the fact that you think that $20,000 is a lot of money for me to try to raise, and I should try to find a pro bono lawyer. I've interviewed over 125 lawyers. I feel like I know more about law firms now. Not law firms and law, but like just like how to get beyond the secretary, because like sometimes they don't want to let you in. So I've interviewed a lot of those law firms, and it's the same story. They listen to me talk for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. They're really interested in my case because I'm not a shitbag, because they don't have to go to the judge and go, well, the guy did cocaine, but he was also a part of this, and he robbed the liquor store, but he was also in combat, so you should retire him. Like, literally with my case, they go in and they say, he was a great sailor. Even the Navy says he was a great sailor, but they're denying medical necessity and medical fact. And so that's something really loud just happened back there. And so that's kind of why the lawyers want to take my case. But when it comes down to it, I say, hey, what's it going to cost me? And that's when they say $15,000 to $20,000, $20,000 on the high end, $15,000 on the low end, and some of them will work with a payment plan with me, some of them won't, and so you just kind of gotta go from there. But you really want to pick a lawyer that's gonna not be a piece of crap lawyer. So anyway, I've seen there's a couple comments on here. Let me address a couple comments. So Caleb says, sounds like you did everything right. I'm sorry you're going through this, and thank you for diligently serving. What you've been through is absolutely admirable. Hey, Caleb, I really appreciate your comments. I don't know if you're still on or not, but I do appreciate you, and appreciate Presley and everything that you guys have been. Presley's been a friend of mine since I was in college, right after I got home from Afghanistan, and I think she kind of seen me in the middle of my breakdown phase of life whenever I was at Wren Lake, and she was a great friend then, and very, very happy for both of you guys and being married, and I thank you, man, because you work at, I believe you work at Boeing, and you work, I don't remember what aircraft you work on, but it's a Navy aircraft, or you used to work in Navy aircraft, and so we need you whenever we work in naval aviation, so thank you. And then Heather Duncan says, wow, that's crap, and I agree with her. And then she says, that's pathetic how they've done you for your service. So that's it. So, one more of these I'm going to do on the Board of Naval Corrected Records, and then anything after that will be basically my commentary of how everything's going forward. I appreciate everyone who's been donating to my legal fund. I can't do this alone. I do need the money. I don't have $20,000 just lying around, so that's why I'm trying to raise it this different way. So instead of like going and asking people for an absurd amount of money for donation, I'm trying to ask for it in small amounts, and I'm trying to give something back for you helping me. And so the best way I could think of was new phones or hot items. People break their phones all the time, and this is a way for me to say, here you go. Here's an opportunity for you to win a phone, and then I can also pay for my lawyer fees at the same time, and not put my family in a burden. And I'm going to talk about the burden that I'm putting on my family in the next few days. I'm not prepared to talk about that right now, but if you think that everything's good here in this house, this is my kitchen. Where I usually do it is in my office upstairs. If you think that things are good here, they're not, and it sucks. Because I'm obsessed with this now. I can't think of anything else, and it's not been good. It's not fair to my wife. It's not fair to my kids. But my brain doesn't process it like that, and it sucks. And I tried, like I tried last night. Like I quit everything and I came downstairs to focus on my family, and I got into an argument with my wife because I wouldn't stop working on it. I keep reading stuff. I read law books. I read case journals, and like I was ignoring my family, and she got pissed off, and she had every right to. So she went to go see her sister and her mother-in-law. Planned trip. This was planned a couple weeks ago before this all happened. And so it was probably good that she left for a couple days because it was pretty bad here. And so now I got a couple days to kind of figure my life out and just kind of get it all together. So telling the story has been therapeutic for me. You listening to me has been therapeutic for me. I know it's not brushed and polished. I apologize, right? I have not written a script, and I don't have some PR firm helping me write it. So, and my wife just logged on, so I love you, babe. But you just missed it. We're logging off. So anyway, thank you. Oh, and Caleb was he worked on F-18s, and I love F-18s because that's what Liz and I worked on the flight deck of the aircraft carrier. So thank you. And Heather Duncan, I will post the link to buy raffle tickets in the comments after this is all over. So appreciate everybody. If you want to watch it afterwards, it'll be on. So I'll probably come back on in a couple hours. I'm gonna make dinner. I'm gonna pre-make dinner so that it's good whenever I eat it later, and then I'll give the final talk, and then I'm gonna start pushing this out to media personnel. I'm gonna start pushing it out to small town newspapers, small town news stations, and we'll see what happens. But this is bad stuff. So anyway, thanks a lot. I'll see you all about Fleet.